in other things, plus the additional that we give them on top of it.
But
Which makes it hard to.
if I'm hearing it correctly and following, so there's designated allotments for the arts, and it's a per pupil, and it is for the arts or for art.
Academics,
Okay?
the academics allotment is for electives and IRT, not core.
That's the 1 to 26.
No, that's the one.
That's the 1 to 50.
The 1 to 26 is
Your
ADM for
ADM.
classroom, and it includes other stuff that you don't get out of the academics ones.
But the old issue used to be that you're generating arts positions on a per pupil allotment, 1 to 500 or 300. So that covers, if you are a large school, that covers your arts electives. But it's the smaller schools that are needing to use ADM, and they're already squeezed in ADM because they don't have enough flexibility to build classes of equal numbers of kids.
Right, and depending on where you are, you have different varying levels of flexibility around class size as well.
Right.
So that's why we started with a inroad into trying to ensure that we provide the funding that's necessary to support at least 3 arts positions per school, regardless of size,
Okay.
and then move beyond that as we need to implement them.
Okay.
The next question is about the teaching assistants case, and we discussed this one at the last meeting, that case could fall under growth or the legislative section of the document. Question 62 is about the guidance counselor and psychologist case. And one seemed to be talking about a position per month per average daily membership, and the other months. There was an error in the document. The formula presented on the school psychology growth case should have said 1 position per 218.55 ADM. So I think that clears up the confusion there. Question 63, if the state counselor allotment is 1 position per 218.55 ADM, why are the Wake County allotments generally twice that? Our instructional support, Program 7 allotment from the state, provides 1 10-month position for every 218.55 at ADM, but those funds are designated for counselors, social workers, nurses, and media specialists, not just for counselors. The recommended ratio for a counselor to student ratio is 1 to 250. Under the current Wake County school system funding for counselors, we maintain the following ratios, and it shows by grade level. It ranges from 1 to 637 students, K-5, to 1 to 374 students, 6-8, and 1 to 391 students in the high schools, grades 9 and 12. 64, on page 85, it's stated that the current request is still inadequate to meet the state formula. Why can we not meet the state formula? And to better communicate the need, can we include the actual dollars value or the month's deficiency? If we were to meet the recommended ratio of 1 to 250 at all grade levels, we would need an additional 3,355 counselor months, which would cost about $22.2 million. Question
And
64.
3,000 and some odd months equals approximately how many positions
330-ish.
divided by 10?
Yeah.
Which is almost 2 per school.
On average.
Question 65, for school psychologists, is it correct the difference between the state formula and the Wake County school system formula is a result of the county local appropriation attempting to increase psychologist capacity in our schools? Nevertheless, it's still critical to recognize that with 1 month per 165 students and the standard 11-month contract, each psychologist is responsible for 1,815 students, almost 3 times the recommended ratio. So this goes back to the same situation that the allotment for instructional support funds several different types of positions. The analysis and insight the questioner included is very much appreciated. Wake County school system is well below the National Association of School Psychologists recommended psychologist to student ratio. Specifically, our ability to provide comprehensive services, including assisting schools with MTSS implementation so that teachers can teach and students can learn, depends on continuing to reduce the ratio.
And I appreciate this information. I was surprised, I didn't recognize it before, that our technology facilitators, media specialists are paid for out of the same pot as our social workers, psychologists, and counselors. That is not our decision, that is a state decision, but that doesn't seem wise to me.
And it's all called instructional support, and when people use that, the public doesn't know what that means.
Right. Well, we didn't know what it
Instructional
meant,
support has
so-
been reduced. Okay, well,
Mhm.
fine, but who is that? It's these kind of positions.
Yeah.
Talk more intelligently about it.
I mean, I was talking with Senator Berenger this morning after our meeting, and she's very concerned, as am I, about a lot of these counseling kinds of issues buried here. So technology and media support is the same thing. So thank you for the information.
So it's our flexibility, right? We can
It
choose to
is.
fund whatever in that bucket.
It's flexible. You want to lose an arm or a leg?
So we got it a while back.
Yeah.
Well, and in real life, you're often looking as a principal at
Sure.
making decisions. Do I
Absolutely.
have somebody to keep my computers up and running, or a half-time counselor,
As we move to
Right.
digital
or mixing? Because
requirements.
you can, I assume you can still divide these positions up if you want to. And so you get into all those kinds of comparisons between two very needy areas.
And we're pitting needs against each other to the disadvantage of our students, I'm afraid, sometimes. And we're trying to do the best we can, but we fall through the cracks.
Question 67, on page 87, we learned that psychology test kits range in price from $414 to $1,075 per test kit, but our allotment in the proposed funding is only for $650 per psychologist per year. That means only one test kit per psychologist. So is the usage history statement merely a reflection of funds that have been available, or does that actually represent the need? The usage history reflects the funds that have been available, along with the fact that some kits are shared and some of our staff are using older computers that are out of warranty. While the request does not reflect the real need, it does give a much needed and overdue increase for supplies that is more in line with the district's current fiscal situation. 67, and this allotment is to now include the purchase of computers for psychologists, but what can $250 of electronic equipment buy? At best, it would be a low-end computer refresh on a 3-year rotation. The answer is many of our staff are using older computers that are out of warranty. While the request does not reflect the real need, it will allow us to refresh computers at a faster rate than is currently possible. This dollar request is more realistic given the district's current fiscal situation. It will give a much-needed and overdue increase for computers. That's the last question.
Efficient but sobering answers.
Well, I had communicated with David that as I looked at the list of deferred things, it was shocking to me the number of things that are in deferred that we used to have 10 years ago.
Yep.
And we just simply don't have them anymore. They're on our deferred list to either increase it, such as the custodial thing. I mean, that had been taken for granted up until just a few years ago that you would clean classrooms every day. So there's all kinds of things like that. So when we talk about getting back to 08 levels of funding, we're really talking about in this deferred list a lot of items that are not new. They just were the way things used to be. So, Mr. Fletcher.
Just an observation, back on question 22, which is the relative availability of months of employment for teachers versus this year versus 2008. That's a 400 teacher delta, fewer teachers, serving 20,000 more students, if I'm reading that right. That would be across the 157,000 students. There are 400 fewer teachers with a 20,000 student increase.
Is that an accurate reading?
I think there's probably some growth numbers in there that they're bringing some teachers along, but the allocation would suggest 400 positions fewer than the ADM supports, comparing the 2 years. Those are certified teaching positions. That's not, those are classroom, qualified classroom people. Did I do that? Is my math good, Terry? Sorry.
What you've got,
I mean, it's 2/10 of a month of employment per student winds up being 400 positions. I mean, 200ths of a month
200 is correct.
winds up being 400 positions, I think. I may have done the math wrong.
They're looking at it real quick.
I think it,
Well, if you take your months of employment, divide by 10, right, you've gone from 65, well, it.
Or that is it
it's not
short,
simple
we're
math.
400 teachers short to have the same capacity as we did in 2000.
Right.
Mhm.
I think that might be what it
That may be a
says.
better way to express it.
That we didn't hire 400 teachers in the last.
That our growth in students
that our
suggested were
growth
needed.
suggests we needed to be at the same
We have more
staff
total months of
capacity as we
employment.
were in 2008. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of adults in the building who aren't there.
Right.
And raises the ratio of students to adults.
You're right.
We're getting a similar number within 100 or so. A few hundred.
Was that a few hundred positions or a few?
No, a
A few
few
hundreds, okay, all right.
We're getting 300-ish.
Months of employment
Okay,
is
all right.
greater, so we have more total people.
Right.
But
That
if you
didn't
look at
keep
the
up with
people
growth.
to
Didn't
student
keep up
ratio,
with
we do not
growth.
keep up with growth.
Not keep up with growth.
Right.
Okay. Additional questions, comments?
I will just echo what Dr. Martin has shared about understanding the reality of where we are financially and what we're able to do, and the also the reality of certain schools and students have much greater needs than we are currently able to meet in terms of helping them choose to be good students. And I think that's a challenge. I believe that within what the superintendent has planned and is partially implemented, we are allocating those resources perhaps where there's greater need than other places as we look at the coming year, to try to have a disparate impact on populations that aren't being successful. And so while I wish we had additional personnel to do that with, we're having to make tough choices about how the personnel we have is deployed. So I appreciate that what's happening behind the scenes with these numbers on top.
Additional questions, comments? Can y'all just remind us again, because I'm asked quite frequently by people that have a need today, up to 37 million, roughly what percent is going for what needs?
80% of that, 80% of that is going to meet the needs of growth, additional students that are coming in, the approximately 2,000 additional students, as well as the additional approximately 1,000 students, charter students, that will be added. And even though they're not coming to the Wake County Public School System, for all intents and purposes, that $36 million, just as we're asking for funding for our additional 2,000 students, that $36 million includes funding the commensurate amount of
So
funding for
get their
those
share.
1,000
Right.
charter students as well, even though it just comes to us, it goes right back out the door.
And they're growing at a faster rate than we are.
So that, you've got program continuity. Those are things we're doing today. In order to continue to do them, we're requesting additional funding and legislative impact. Included within that, probably the biggest driver, our estimate of a 3% state legislative compensation increase. And again, the state will fund the state-funded employees, but for our locally funded employees, we need local funding. And even for our state-funded employees, our certified staff that have a teacher salary supplement will require additional local funding to be able to fund that. And it's possible that will come in even higher, but that's another issue altogether.
And new schools?
And yes, the operating cost of 4 new elementary schools and 1 new middle school. Operating costs including custodial services, maintenance, utilities, groundskeeping, all the operating costs that come online. Those are locally borne. We generally do not get state funding for those.
And is that in that 80% of the growth, or that's on top of
That
it?
is in the 80%
Is in the
number.
80%, yeah.
10% is for new programs and expanding programs, and the remaining 10% falls into additional costs and some adjustments and other things. So 80% of that request of additional local funding, growth, program continuity, legislative impact.
And if I remember, you can actually go to page numbers and see how those figures were arrived at.
Yes.
We have this list of deferred now.
Right.
Yeah.
Small.
Right, so you're mulling. Anybody have additional questions, suggestions? Bill?
Well, I won't, it's not a question, but as we're looking at the facility plan for the next 7 years, the question of whether of how much technology we're able to fund out of facilities that might be more properly funded out of an operating budget. And while I'm not suggesting that any change be made to this year's budget, I think it is something our community needs to be aware of, and certainly policymakers need to be aware of, that ultimately we need to be able to include our technology funding in the operating budget. And that could be, I don't know what the metrics would be, but if we've got 160,000 students, 10,000 teachers, there's a number out there that says this is what's necessary to keep this operation functioning well.
We had said $27 million a year for
And
the
the
3-year
more-
refresh.
The more we become dependent upon technology for a lot of our instructional tools, the more critical it becomes that this is a built-in operational component of what we do. So I'm not suggesting any change to what the superintendent's put on the table. Over the next 5 to 7 years, we need to figure out how to do that, whether it's a combination of things happening at the state and local. It's a recognition. To say that textbooks will be digital, therefore we can reduce the state budget, is a non-starter.
Right.
It's a critical need to support what happened. Business would not survive today with a 10-year refresh on their technology. They'd be down the tubes. We are the big business in Wake County serving the future of our community. So.
Any additional questions or comments?
Amen.
Once again, I want to commend the superintendent and all your staff for spending countless days and months trying to come up with what represents effective operational needs and trying to capture some of the wishes of the board. And I'm ready to move further along with this process. How are we with the rest of the board members?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. The next step will be to bring this to the next board meeting to vote on?
That would be our next step, yes, sir.
Question about is this on the joint meeting agenda for the 26th, which my understanding that it's going to focus on capital needs.
At this point, that's right, although we can still tinker with agenda Monday, but we'll probably need every minute on capital, I think.
So once we have an official proposed budget from the board, then we will need additional communications with the county commissioners on our officially adopted.
Tom, I think last work session we'd suggested that some of the question, comment, answer would be forwarded to the commissioners.
They were.
Just, they have been?
They
Yeah,
were
just
that
wondered.
day.
Good.
So the update will go
Yeah.
tonight or tomorrow.
Did you
also.
get any response from that?
An interesting one, but other than we received it, thank you.
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
from staff.
Yeah. No, I just think the communication, they can't say that they're, they don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Our next item is District Regional Leadership and Management Structure. Ms. Moore and Mr. Conley. Dr. Conley.
Good afternoon. Marvin is at another meeting off-site. We'll try to make it back at some point, but not sure we'll get back in time for this.
Not right on time, Mr. Chair. I know.
Get to my item. So you will notice there are a number of attachments. The last two attachments are the list of schools, including the proposed Northwestern area, and a map that shows the distribution of the schools geographically. We had come and spoken to the board a couple weeks ago about realigning and doing some work to add an additional district and decrease the span of control for area superintendents, better serve the needs of schools. And we gave you the proposed lists. We've gotten a little bit of feedback. Those lists are still not final. There's still a couple things that we're looking at in terms of the locations of schools, middles to high, and some other things and where they are. But I think that part of the rationale for bringing it back, and we didn't receive any other questions about any of it from board members. And then the next piece in terms of all of the other attachments was a desire perhaps for the board to take a look at what staff is proposing for our district leadership management structure and how that springboards into a conversation that the board can have about how you're proceeding with BACs. Just a point of recollection, you have waived the policy that requires that you have your BAC leadership structures already set up by the end of this school year for next year so that you have a little bit more time to engage in the discussion.
And an additional reminder, although there's some advantages to being aligned with the superintendent's organization, we're not in any way required to do that.
That is correct.
Bill?
I haven't submitted any comment prior. I guess I'm asking or wanting to understand from a superintendent standpoint that it appears that Highway 54 has become a dividing line for two of the regions, with schools north of 54 joining up with the Leesville area, or the Millbrook-Sanderson area, and south of 54 staying in Western. And I don't know. I guess that there has to be. It's kind of like drawing a line. Anything else, you've got to pick some place to do it.
So you're talking about the
Well,
movement between Western and
Yeah,
Northwestern and Northern.
Northwoods, Reedy Creek, Morrisville, those schools, Kingswood, those schools moving to well, I guess half of those are schools that have been classified in Cary at the moment. Carpenter, Cedar Fork, Kingswood, Morrisville, Northwoods, Reedy Creek. Again, I guess it's, in terms of looking at the BAC, I wouldn't want to do that. In terms of looking at what will support the superintendent's efforts at regional structure, I'm happy to support it. I think the BAC would need to be different than that.
The airport at Hempstead Park makes kind of a funny
Yeah.
division.
Two worlds.
And we've that's been, from a board district standpoint, that's been out there now for 15 years. I think the swing around of District 7 down to Panther Creek started back at 2000, I think. It was certainly in place before the 2010 redistricting. So, it's been done. Jumped over the airport. It's just, you know, it's from a BAC from a supporting the superintendent's plan, I don't have a problem with it. For BACs, I'd like to see a little different organization.
And Kevin and Christine, y'all want to comment in about looking at some structures for BACs?
We figure out what I want to share here at the table. We've looked at trying to start with the district regional leadership chart and then see where some tweaking might take place, sort of like what Bill just mentioned. For example, I've talked with Kathy a little bit about it, but you look at Abbott's Creek under Northeastern, and then you look at Durant, the Durants under Northern, and they're across the street from each other.
100 yards apart.
Yeah, so from a BAC point of view, it would make, I think, make sense to try and do a little tweaking in there.
And with the new board district lines, are they in one board member's district or are they in separate districts?
So that's what we've got to look at.
Yeah.
We've got to get those maps, maybe wait to May 9th, maybe, but the same with Forest Pines and North Forest Pines. In Northeastern, under the Northern, you've got the Wakefields, and they're just right around the street. So there's some tweaking we're looking at, and still talking about either 8 or 9 districts, and then how board members would be assigned to those districts because of the lettered districts. Like I said this morning, I don't think there's anything possible in a lettered district. You could have 80 or 85, 86 schools in a BAC. I just don't see that at all. So it'd be a matter of coming to the table, closing the door, getting a Coca-Cola, and sitting down and trying to hash this out.
Right.
Because as we're
And-
comparing this map to even the currently drawn districts or the next districts, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
So it seemed as though one option would be to assign every board member to whatever the regions turn out to be. And that would also help the board member look out for additional schools and to have a set of schools that each board member knows through the BAC as well as through their political representation.
And has there been some mention for BAC purposes of rolling the elementary support model schools into
Yes.
something different and just a separate?
Close to the districts or the districts that they pair with now, because those schools are used to working together, at least in the BAC function.
Okay.
Christine and I went through and took a sheet and put the current district number next to each school, so you can really see the difference. I've got my briefcase, and so
And
we've
keep in
got it, so
mind,
we're
those
working
were
on it.
perfect.
Almost.
We had some issues with some of those as well, but they were a lot better than what we're getting in the future.
Yes.
And I would just add to the discussion as y'all are looking at this and considering doing a slightly different composition for BACs based on logical areas, like for the southwestern area, understood for the area superintendent reasons why you wanted to keep Southeast Raleigh in the group, but for the BAC, I don't think that makes
Right.
sense. That type of thing.
And that would be one of the tweaks we'd probably have to look at, but we'll get a couple of you guys to join us and maybe find some time. I think in the next week or two, or maybe, so aren't most BACs on about their last meeting of the year
Already
this
had
year?
ours.
We had
We've had our
last
last
night.
meeting
I
this
told them I
year,
may
too.
not see any of them again, I might see some of them again, we didn't know, and we'd be in touch over
That's
summer.
that's what I told mine.
Well, we have a meeting scheduled and a school hosting.
We do in August.
Whoever is a part of our BAC,
Yeah.
we've got
You
a,
know, we
We've
did
got that
schedule
set up.
anything, we don't
And
have to.
in addition, the new voting districts are being reviewed by what court, Mr. Attorney?
The Fourth Circuit
Circuit.
Board of Appeals.
Richmond?
The- Now the very
Richmond,
famous Fourth
Virginia.
Circuit Court of
Yes,
Appeals,
yes, it
based on its other ruling
Yes, it
today.
is.
So, yes,
Yes,
Fourth
ma'am.
Circuit is going to be reviewing on May 9th. They'll have oral argument, and then they'll render a decision on whether to uphold the current lines or to overturn them.
Okay.
Are we looking at feeder patterns as well in the BAC? because
Yeah.
particularly as families go
Trying
from.
to,
Yeah.
trying to.
Trying to,
Yeah.
as best possible.
And again, we're not gonna be perfect.
Right, these regions,
And maybe not as much programmatic feeder patterns as much as based feeder patterns.
Yes, base is more critical than
Yes.
focus.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Any additional questions, comments? And again, Kevin and Christine had sort of volunteered after the last meeting to work some on these proposals. And it sounds like you're also saying if anybody else wants to join with you
Well,
on this.
it would help to get a little input as we go, as opposed to put a lot of time into it and then get the input afterwards.
and it's not falling out easily.
Either way.
I mean, just know.
I know.
Yeah.
We were going round and round.
Right, about a day and a half, I said, why did we volunteer for this?
I know.
Right.
Thank you.
But roughly, you're looking at having obviously one area superintendent, even if it's not in accord with this, that would be aligned with the BAC lines that you draw, and that the board would approve your BAC lines, but you're not approving the superintendent's
Right.
lines. That's his deal.
Well, and I have two area superintendents that come to my
I have
business.
three.
Yeah, okay.
We have three.
Three to come to mind, yeah.
Okay.
So we're kind of used to that.
You're used to that. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
They're used
They
to
may
it.
or may
Yeah.
I think it all depends on the menu.
Yeah, free meal.
So, thoughts on when this, our timeline on when this would come back? I mean, Kevin mentioned after May 9th, but May 9th, that's when the Fourth Circuit hears the argument, so you probably would not likely get a super fast ruling, although they know they need to move quickly. Remember, they decided to hear,
It is expedited.
they decided to hear the case in an expedited fashion, so, they're gonna move quickly, but it wouldn't be that day, or that would be shocking.
Yeah, I say
I think it'd be unwise for us to take action before we,
Oh, yeah.
before
Yeah,
any
no
final, I mean, we
tension
gotta
in
work
that.
ahead of time.
Okay.
For action, I think.
Maybe by
So-
our second May meeting or something, we'd be in a position to do something if we need to do something.
Well, I think our goal would be to put something on the table, say, if nothing changes, this
Right.
is what we would recommend. But we would have to wait until there's some closure.
Right. All right. So Kevin, you'll communicate if there's going to be any working ad hoc group?
Certainly.
Okay.
We'll find out where Coca-Cola's gonna sell,
All right.
pick some up, and we'll go to town.
Not a committee of the board or
Not at
anything
all.
like that,
No.
just some
No.
feedback
Just some
to
feedback.
Yeah.
Mr. Hill.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
We know how to avoid a
Next item, and we're moving right ahead.
Now we got more time.
Strategic plan achievement.
So why should it be simple?
Or easily understood.
Dr. Merrill, I don't see
Sir.
that Marvin has returned. Is there,
Marvin's in the house.
are there,
These two guys.
in a doctoral committee.
are there any, I'm sort of thinking ahead, I might be wishful thinking because I don't know for sure what these two gentlemen are going to have us do. But if we have spare time, be thinking about items from close that we might could do this afternoon.
Be delighted.
Okay?
Do you have all your cast here that you need? All right.
Cast of thousands.
Good afternoon, Chair Benton, members of the school board, Dr. Merrill, superintendent's leadership team. My name's Jim Hedrick, and I'm principal at Athens Drive High School. And I'm along with Rodney Trice, assistant superintendent for equity affairs. We are the co-chairs for the achievement objective. What we're going to do this afternoon is we're going to spend a few minutes prepping you a little bit for the achievement objective and talking a little bit about the achievement objective. Once we're done in here, we'll talk a little bit more about it later. We're going to go out into the boardroom where we have several activities for you to participate in with some of our students, teachers, and administrators, this type of thing. So, at this time, you've all seen this. This should be in your packet. Vision 2020, the vision to have all students prepared for a complex and changing world to lead productive lives, our mission, relevant and engaging education that will graduate students who model the 4 C's, who are collaborative, creative, effective communicators, and critical thinkers. And our goal ultimately is to graduate 95% of our students on time by the year 2020. Our achievement objective team is a very diverse group of folks within the school system. It includes teachers, principals, counselors, folks out of the academics office, area superintendents, and virtually every other department within the school system. So we have a very diverse group of people that have worked closely together to bring us to this point. And the objective and the achievement objective is simply to increase proficiency and growth rates across all subgroups and to eliminate any predictability of achievement throughout these subgroups. And at this time, I'll turn it over to my co-chair, Dr. Trice.
Thank you, Jim. So last month, the board had the opportunity to unpack the learning and teaching objective. And I think we all walked away from that experience really understanding why and how learning and teaching was at the core of what we do. It's why we're here. I want to talk a little bit about the achievement objective. And our team likes to think of the achievement objective as the district's work to ensure that all students have access to quality learning and teaching experiences, irrespective of one's social or economic status. And so when you think about our meetings, or when I think about them, there's one question on the table. How do you close gaps? Whether we're talking about achievement gaps or opportunity gaps, that's at the core of our work. And we see that there are 3 strategies that we lean on to do just that, close gaps. The first is to increase educational opportunities. The second is equity-focused professional learning and adaptive leadership practices. And the third is to expand non-academic student supports. Now, I'm going to give you an overview of each one of those strategies, but I want you to know that in the participant packet that you have in front of you that's flipped to your clipboard, under each strategies, there's a more comprehensive and detailed description of the action steps that we have under each strategy. So I'm going to give you a high-level overview. You can look there if you want more detail, and we can talk. So the first strategy, increasing educational opportunities. There are 3 action steps that we lean on to ensure that we increase educational opportunities. The first one is focused on equitable access to rigorous rigorous learning opportunities supported by a comprehensive academic support structure. Now, we know that students who are disconnected from a positive schooling experience are also those who are often missing from rigorous learning opportunities. And so the work in this action step is around identifying and recruiting at-promise students who have the capacity to do the work and making sure that they take advantage of those learning experiences. Now, we know that we can increase the expectation of students, but we also need to increase the support that we provide students. So there's a lot of energy in our team around developing a comprehensive model for academic support at each one of our schools, that each one of our schools can lean on. The second action step deals with addressing disproportionality in our school system. And so we continue with the work on trying to reduce suspensions and other exclusionary practices. As you all know, that's work that is very at the core of what we do. But we're also looking at the overrepresentation of students of color in high incident areas of special education, particularly African American males. So we have teams in place that are looking at just that. How do we use strategies and our organization to eliminate those disparities? We also see in this action step work around addressing the under-identification of students of color, low-income students, and English language learners in the AIG gifted area. So there are a number of areas of disproportionality that you would see in our participant packet that we're addressing through this action step. And then lastly, we want to ensure that there's equitable access to college and career readiness resources. We understand how critical it is for every student and every parent, pre-K through 12, to understand what it takes to get to college and or career. So through this action steps, we're actually in the process of developing a blueprint with metrics and benchmarks that parents will have, and students will have a clear understanding of the roadmap from where they are to college and or career. So that's the primary activity under that action step. If we look at strategy number 2, equity-focused professional learning and adaptive leadership, there are 2 action steps that we want to focus on today. The first is expanding learning opportunities in the area of cultural responsiveness. We know that the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, and beliefs that we as educators bring to the table have a direct impact on the capacity of our students to achieve. And so through professional development, we want to be sure that we're always mindful and challenging the assumptions that we bring to the table. So this action step focuses on professional development, and I'd like the board to know that this professional development is not different and separate from professional development that we see in the learning and teaching area, but they're combined. It's the same work. So Brian's team and our team are hard at work trying to figure out how we can infuse equity work and a lot of other PD opportunities together to ensure that we're providing the best professional development for our teachers and other educators. The second action step is really focused on the idea that equity work is not just professional development. It's about the decisions we make, the policies we create, the practices that we implement, and we are wanting, there's a lot of energy. This is at the conceptual stage of designing a Center for Educational Leadership where we can research and design solutions to our most pressing equity challenges in the district. The idea here is that we can collaborate across departments and even bring in outside partners such as universities, college professors who can also help kind of push solutions to our most pressing equity challenges. That's strategy 2. Strategy 3, expand non-academic student supports. We know that when a student is connected in a meaningful way to a positive schooling experience, student achievement goes up. And so our third strategy focuses on just that. With the first action step, expanding prevention and intervention strategies for students that are experiencing social and or emotional challenges. We know that we have some students who maybe are not well fed or well dressed. Those may be social challenges that they face, but how are we set up as a district to intervene and support if that is the case? We know that some of our students come to us with experiencing trauma from the home or in the community. And our schools put together in a way or have the resources to help intervene and meet those students when they come so that they can have a positive experience when they get to school.
Ron, is there a matrix to say how many of these relationships a student needs to be resilient?
I don't know that there's a matrix, but there's
the example I've seen in this area is that of a dream catcher.
Yeah.
That a dream catcher with just 2 strings in it won't catch any dream. It has to be a web of interconnected relationships that winds up providing the resilience. And if we've got a teacher and a principal and a music teacher that have those relationships, that's not enough for some of these kids. So,
yeah, and I think that's where we focus, and I think it also kind of goes to our second bullet point here, where we want to actually recruit at-promise kids and ensure that they're connected to meaningful experiences, either through the arts, sports, clubs, other co-curricular activities, because it does take a group of people to kind of wrap around students. But again, this is probably my favorite strategy from the achievement objective, because we know that without being connected to a positive schooling experience, whatever we say about increased achievement or better teaching, it doesn't necessarily impact students unless they're connected to a positive schooling experience. So this is a heavy focus of our team. So this is a very high-level overview of the 3 strategies of our objective. And again, I'll remind you that the more comprehensive, detailed look is found on pages 3, at the bottom of pages 3 through 6 in the participant packet that you have in front of you. So you'll remember for the past 2 years at your board retreats, one of the undercurrents has been this concept of adaptive leadership. And one of the tenets of adaptive leadership is before you design solutions to any challenge, you have to understand the voice and you have to get the participation of those who are closest to the challenge. So we've designed for you today an experience that will let you hear from those who are closest to the challenge. Students, parents, teachers, principals, and counselors. And Jim is going to give us just a quick overview of what the directions are that will lead us to next week.
Okay, if you'll take a look at the second page of your packet that you've been provided, on the second page, we've already grouped you. There are groups 1, 2, and 3. We're going to have 4 stations, but there are only 3 groups. What we're going to do is when you go to group 1, group 2, or group 3, we have 3 20-minute sessions proposed. 13 minutes for the folks in each one of those sessions to tell you why they're there, how they fit in that strategy. 5 minutes for you to ask questions of those folks, and then we'll have 2 minutes to rotate into the next group. When you get to your 3rd station, once you are finished with that 3rd station, we have what the adaptive school folks call a small fire. You will stay there and we will bring in a different group to you. And for about 10 minutes or so, they will talk about one of these other areas of one of our strategies. And it will be different for each one. We're not going to rotate through those groups. You will only get one small fire session. And that session will last about 10 to 12 minutes. Any questions? For those of you who do not have a packet in here, we have packets available for you out on the table. Okay? At this time, if we can transition to the boardroom. And Rodney and I will be keeping time and we'll keep them moving.
We don't need our tablets.
Thank you. Was there only one pack list?
There's more than one, but I thought about last time we had to split, I split the windows.
District board that said, you gotta use the bathroom of your biological self. You don't get to go to the bathroom of your gender identity. OCR said, no, you get to go to the bathroom of your gender identity. The Fourth Circuit overturned the district court's decision and said, it has to come back to the district court for an additional ruling. And basically they said, you should have given more deference, more weight to OCR's opinion. And I don't know how they can give more weight to OCR's opinion without ruling in favor of the child, but it's still a step that is yet to be made to make it definitive. But it's a huge ruling for transgender students, and another punch in the face to HBD. How's that?
We're good.
Yep. It's exploding.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure I got an alert. I must have been somewhere in here. When I hit my phone.
I'm reading it right now, man. I mean, that's the court opinion right now.
Okay.